Welcome to Hands Off. My name is Rhett Hackett, and we are continuing our series on the troubled teen industry, breaking code silence. And this is our first show of 2021, and what a show it is. I have an amazing guest on here tonight. His name is Theo Charles, and I'm going to have him introduce himself, but I will tell you that he has a compelling story that includes everything from being active in the movement of breaking code silence, right to speaking and standing alongside Paris Hilton, and I'll let him talk about that. But Theo, thank you for coming on the show and doing this, and just go ahead and introduce yourself, a little bit of background, where you're from, what school did you attend, how many years were you there, etc.
Cool. So my name's Theo. I'm from Denver, Colorado, and I spent 21 months, 6 days, and 14 hours at the hell that is Cross Creek. Based out of Laverkin, Utah. I was part of the WASP's umbrella system of schools, or the Worldwide Association of Specialty Programs. It was an experience.
Yes, and I really appreciate you spelling out what WASP stands for. So, so I know this is always the hardest part, in terms of time constraints. But just kind of like walk us through what. First of all, let me just explain that the transport part of your story is absolutely shocking. It's what I'm most familiar with. If you can lead off with that and then kind of just like walk us through what it was like arriving and what that time period was like for you, I can't even imagine, and that's why I'm really glad that you're doing this.
Yeah, the transport part, honestly, that's one of the things that to this day I have a lot of PTSD over, like a lot of crazy transport nightmares. And for those of you that might not be familiar with the term transport that are watching this, basically, the schools will work with the parents to literally kidnap the students, and usually they have these big, beefy people come in, and in my case, literally grabbed me in the middle of the night. I had no idea where I was going. I had zero idea what was going on. All I knew was that the door to my house was opening. In walks my dad, which is weird enough considering that my mom had a restraining order against my dad. And then these two huge people came in behind him. They grabbed me, threw me up against this countertop. Within a couple seconds, they had me in handcuffs, which I think is illegal to handcuff a minor in the state of Colorado. Literally carried me out, kicking and screaming at something like 11:30 at night in March in Colorado, which you have to understand is really cold. And I was wearing, I think like a sleeveless shirt, pajama bottoms, no shoes, no socks. Next thing I know, I'm in the back of the car, and we're heading out towards some random like dirt strip that's been like converted into an airport in this tiny little podunk town called Rifle, Colorado. And on the way, I tried to make a break for it. We stopped at a 7-Eleven to pick up these two, I guess you could call them pilots, and I tried to make a break and ran a few blocks, again, bare feet in March in Colorado. And eventually this cop saw me running in handcuffs down the street, stopped me. The transport guy caught up. He talked to the cop. He explained what transporting was. I, as a 16-year-old, had no idea what that term meant.
16.
I had never heard it.
Yeah.
And next thing I knew, they were both escorting me back to the car, and then next thing I knew, I was on a plane. And when I got to the facility, I guess they must have like called ahead or something and let them know that there was an incident, because the very first thing that happened was the door opened and this 300-pound guy came out and kind of grabbed me from the back of my neck right here, kind of right by these pressure points, slammed me on the ground, and carried me off into the isolation room, which is this tiny little room where you it's got a wood floor and you lie down on your stomach with your chin up against the floor, your arms out, and on your stomach. So you're kind of in this weird sort of like crucifixion pose, and he just lies on you until you stop resisting. And in most kids' cases, they pass out from asphyxiation. So that was my intake process.
And can you describe well, first, I always ask, I try to ask this question, what was that first, second, third night like, first week? I mean, you probably had no idea what was going on.
Honestly, I didn't even really know where I was. The climate in Utah and like southern Utah is fairly similar to like the high Rockies. Mm-hmm. So at first I was like, am I still in Colorado? Am I still in Utah? Like, they didn't even tell me where I was at first. And then after that, I'll preface this by saying my time spent there, I was kind of known as the outspoken leftist, feminist queer Jew. So they, as you can imagine, in the heart of conservative Utah, I was really popular.
Yeah.
And so they didn't like me too much. And honestly, most of these programs are run with this very, very conservative slant and this very kind of traditional family style view, like something I got out of the 50s. So being as outspoken as I am, immediately I was met with a lot of resistance. And, I was berated, belittled, called pretty much every name you can think of under the book. When you first get there, they have you on this like kind of like buddy process with like an older student, kind of this like mentor thing. And even he kind of kept saying to me like, dude, you gotta cool out. Like, you're not going to do well here talking like this.
Yeah.
Getting used to like the day-to-day schedule was weird, but more than anything, I remember just sort of looking around and seeing the way things were happening and seeing the way people were being treated. And I kind of had this thought in my head where I kept saying to myself, like, this place literally represents everything I'm against. Mm-hmm. And I think the hardest part wasn't so much the nights as much as it was, there would be this little moment. I'm not sure how long it lasted, but there'd be this moment whenever you'd wake up in the morning. And for a brief second, when you were new there, your brain would kind of forget where you were. And you would kind of wake up, and it was like this blissful moment where you kind of forgot you were locked behind these four walls. But then it came shattering when you realized where you were, and you just experienced the overall heartbreak every single day.
That is amazing that you use that terminology, because I have, for my own personal self, as well as others, spoken of what I just call, it's almost like 2 minutes of freedom. Because there's that 2-minute window when you first wake up that you don't realize whatever nightmare it is that you're living in, that you're still in it. And then all of a sudden, the reality comes and slaps you right in the face. So when did you realize that you were there and you were going to be there for a long period of time? How long did that take?
I don't know if I'm sure you're familiar with the 5 stages of grief. There's an acronym I used to remember them called DABDA, and it stands for denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance, in that order. And I remember distinctively going through the 5 stages of grief when I was
Absolutely.
there. And I remember like at first I was totally in denial. I was like, I would get like introduced to like various kids, and I remember not even wanting to like remember their names, because I was like, I'm not going to be here long enough. I'm not even going to bother remembering your names. Like it was weird. Like I'm usually not the kind of person, but I was like, something about it was like, I was like that against it.
Yeah.
Then, I think, because like they conditioned the parents, the parents in a lot of ways are just as much a victim to the whole process as the kids are. So they kind of prep the parents for like the things the kids are going to say. They prep the parents knowing that we're going to try to make contact or write letters being like, oh my God, this is horrible. Please let us out. Please get us home. And they make the parents think they're sending us off to these really, really nice boarding schools. And, they make these promises like, there were like tennis courts and swimming pools, which I never saw a swimming pool for the record. So, when you send these letters home being like, hey, please help, the parents were already like, no, you're manipulating us.
Right.
And I think that's when anger set in. And of course that was followed by some letters being like, like, I'll do whatever you want. I'll be this perfect little child. Like, please just get me out of here. So that would be the bargaining. I was stuck in depression for months.
Oh yeah.
Maybe even the better part, actually probably the better part of a year. Actually, I remember one of the most frustrating things was one of the this woman named Sherry Wagner, who was supposed to be this like intermediary between the families for my group, who honestly had no business being in that position. She would kind of like accost me from time to time and say like, "Oh, come on, it's not that bad." And I would just kind of be like, "You're not living this, dude. You have no idea how bad this is."
Right. Right.
And then, yeah, I would say it was probably well over a year that I was there that I finally kind of accepted it.
Wow, that's amazing. Do you know whose idea was it to send you there?
So this is a crazy story. So flashback to April 20th, 1999. That's the date of the Columbine massacre here in Denver. As you can imagine, the political and social landscape was a much different time back then.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in a lot of ways, that was like one of the biggest media representations of a school shooting at the time.
Right.
So I was living in this area called Basalt, which is about 200 miles outside of Denver. And it's, you know, it's a mountain town, and it was pretty common before Columbine for kids in my town to do things like bring like BB guns and airsoft guns and that kind of stuff to like go shoot like cans and stuff after school. So these two kids in my school got busted with BB guns like right after Columbine, and of course because of the change in the landscape, you know, it was a huge deal. It got like national attention. And, you know, it was on like CNN, you know, another Colorado school, another shooting or another gun related incident. And one of the girls was both the girls were expelled and one of them was sent to Cross Creek. Well, in a weird twist of fate, that girl's mom was a pretty good friend with my mom. And years and years later, I think I was in fourth grade at the time. I was a sophomore in high school when I got sent. So how many years that is? My mom was talking to her mom and was kind of saying like, "Oh, my son's out of control," blah blah blah, and Cross Creek got brought up, and that's how I got sent there. So in a really weird way, Columbine directly
was a contributing factor.
Me going to Cross Creek.
Looking back, would you say that you were a troubled teen, or were you just being a teenager getting in trouble?
Yes, I'll elaborate. Was I troubled? Looking back at it, absolutely. You know, I was definitely dealing with some serious issues with depression, suicidal thoughts, some minor drug use. So yeah, I mean, I guess you could call that troubled. That said, do I think that Cross Creek or WASP or most of these schools in the troubled teen industry were the right choice? Absolutely not. And I think if these schools have been a lot more honest with what their approach to corrective behavior had been, and B, if the parents would be, you know, a little more, I guess, forthcoming about vetting the place, I think it would have been a lot different.
I agree. And the things that you just said that you were going through, to me, that's a teen in trouble, not a troubled teen. And there's a difference between that. You know, I think that, you know, as I've spoken to many people that have attended this or, you know, not necessarily that school, but other schools, that it really was, there was a money piece to this in terms
100%.
of, right. So keeping that in perspective, and I know that hindsight is always 20/20, it's easier to look back and see all these flags, but I also think that there was, the treatment just is beyond my comprehension, and I think what makes it even worse is that it's still going on at different schools currently today. So what do you think contributed to you, like, we talk about this on the show, getting through that? Like, how did you survive and get out of there and be here today?
In terms of like the actual program, eventually I just kind of learned to like keep my head down. And, you know, there was like little sayings that we had within the program. Like one of them was try not to ask questions because questions create rules. And the more rules there are, the more ways that, you know, the staff can mess with you and things like that. And, you know, they put us through these really, really, really insanely abusive and intensive seminars. And you know, one of the things they would do is they'd be like these intensive 3 days where you would just kind of like sit there and get berated and get torn down over and over again. And basically what they were doing is they were trying to tear you down so they could like build you up in the kind of like in the cookie cutter image that they wanted. Mm-hmm. And part of this, you know, after like days and days of like, you know, things like having you rehash some of like the most horrific moments of your life, and then using like attack therapy with everyone like ganging up on you to, you know, tell you how in this weird twisted worldview they had of accountability. Like, for example, there was a girl in one of my seminars who was telling a story about being gang raped, and everyone was kind of like instructed to like go off on her about how like she was accountable for it. There's a lot of like victim shaming going on, how she kind of created it for herself. You know, it was horrible. But then after they tear you down like this, then they bring you into this like sort of guided meditation where they, after this whole process, they make you pick your kind of these like positive affirmation words to tell yourself over and over. And the ones I chose for myself, I remember it was, I am a peaceful, loving, worthy, and free young man. And part of the reason I used the word free in there was it was kind of like a code word to myself. And they would ask me all the time, what does free mean? And I would always respond, you know, like, oh, I'm free from, I don't know, what people think of me or something. Yeah. The truth was I was free from those people, and I was free from like their control over me. Because I knew in order to like get through the program, because my parents weren't going to pull me, sure. I knew in order to get through it, I was going to have to like do the whole thing and graduate, which I would kind of have to like probably sell out a little bit. But free was kind of my reminder to myself that I wasn't fully buying in. And although I knew I would be a little brainwashed when I got out, free would kind of, you know, bring me back. Sure. So it was like kind of a little middle finger to them, but also kind of my little like sleeper cell word to myself.
There's sellout and survival, and I think that plays a factor. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, where I want to go next is talk about life today and where you're at, and you know why you chose to be here. So we'll be right back.
Sounds good.
Boardwalks built for fun. Legendary rock and roll clubs.
This is how we do it. Hippity hop.
Casinos by the ocean.
Hippity hop.
Now that's New Jersey. 130 miles of beautiful beaches, solid rock, and everything in between.
Look in the window.
Now that's New Jersey. Plan your New Jersey trip at visitnj.org. Waves of fun. Nights of excitement. And a trail of memories. Now that's New Jersey.
This plus this equals this plus this.
We are back on Hands Off, and we are continuing our series on the troubled teen industry, breaking code silence, WASP. I'm not going to take up any more time going back to our guest. His name is Theo Charles, and before we went to break, we were talking about you know, just kind of like the depth of the seminars and the brainwashing process that, you know, comes up in our conversation often. What I want to ask, I want to start off and ask, do you have a relationship with your family today?
I do, but it's strained. I'll say this, like my dad and I haven't talked in close to a decade now.
Okay.
And for a while there, you know, for a few years after the program, we were good, but you know, eventually just various toxic traits kind of won out, and I kind of just decided to keep him at arm's distance, and that's that. My mom and I, you know, we've been pretty decent, but it was actually only recently through Breaking Code Silence that we finally had the conversation that I've been wanting to have since I left the program, which was, you know, I'm not manipulating you, Mom. Some really harrowing stuff went down, and because of breaking code silence, I was finally able to be like, hey, check this out. There's this huge thing going on the internet. Click this link or follow this hashtag, go down the rabbit hole, give yourself a few hours and call me back. And she did. And I think it was like 2 hours later, she called me back like crying. And I believe her exact words through tears were like, this is not what I signed you up for. And, you know, it was like kind of this moment of grace, this moment of clarity where I was just like, finally.
Yes. Well, there has to be a point of validation in that. I mean, my goodness.
And I think one of the things a lot of the former students have been saying is, you know, like, what would be our end game here? Like, why? Like, what would be our final manipulation on you guys?
Especially now.
Right.
Yeah. It's ridiculous.
You know, and the other scary thing is, you know, if there are literal thousands of us spread out all over the world that have this exact same story that have never even met, then how are we all lying?
Yeah, and you know, in one of our I think it was our very first interview, we talked about, because we had like a panel interview, and we talked about how, you know, this is not an East Coast thing, a West Coast thing. This is not, you know, it has nothing to do with race or any of that. It really was just the manipulation of parents and then the infliction of abuse on children. So, do you I know you talked about PTSD. And, you know, I'm sure there are other things that you have been able to connect back to what happened to you. Anything that stands out, number one, other than PTSD?
There's a lot of things that, I mean, I'm not a professional, so I'm not entirely sure, but I've definitely had some major suspicions. Like I have really hard difficulties, connecting with people. I get like really, really nervous in like, you know, big crowds. I get, my trust level with people is like really, really hard to establish. And I feel like for the longest part of my life, I've had like sort of this feeling like there's this barrier, between me and others that sort of haven't gone through this.
Yeah.
I think I'm pretty sure it's affected like, my work relationships, because any sort of time I'm in a position with anyone who's any sort of like a management or authority figure, I just like can't fully connect with them just because, you know, I guess I was like mismanaged so hard at the program that I just have zero trust.
Yeah. On that note, what does life look like today? Are you married? Do you have children? Where do you work?
I'm single. Because of the pandemic, like I was, after CrossFit, I had a kind of short-lived athletic snowboard career, and then I had a career-ending injury. So after that, I kind of floundered for a bit. I ended up finding DJing, and I was doing really well actually as a DJ before this freaking pandemic. But as you can imagine, the entertainment industry is at a complete standstill right now.
Right.
So I've just kind of been doing like weird one-off gig work, so like, you know, compensate financially.
Okay. And you know, I want to ask the question, I almost kind of know the answer, but like, why did you want to come on this show and speak out? I mean, you've done some speaking out, standing alongside Paris Hilton. I saw some of your photos as well too. You know, some really amazing image. Like, you've obviously become a voice and an advocate for, you know, for those that might not be able to speak. But what is it internally? I mean, I think it's just within your spirit, just hearing how you were when you were first being brought in, but I'll let you answer the question.
That's a part of it. And also I think that getting the knowledge out there, this kind of stuff is continuing to happen, is the biggest step I feel that we can take to stop it from continuing to happen. One of the feelings I had when I was inside the program, for example, one of the rules was that we weren't allowed to look out the windows. But that said, that's not to say that we didn't look out the windows. Like, of course, I'm pretty sure I can speak for everyone in that we all did as much as we could. But I do remember a lot of times looking out gates or windows and having this feeling like I was never going to get outside of that window. I was never going to get outside of that gate. I was never going to be free again. And it was a feeling that was just like, you know, I don't know if you call it doom, but it was definitely the antithesis of hope. And, you know, as we speak, as you and I are speaking right now, there's a little kid going through that exact same feeling. There's some kid somewhere, probably in Utah, thinking, no one knows I'm here. No one knows what's going on inside this place. I'm never getting out. The world has forgotten about me. And that's a big reason that I'm trying to use my voice now. And because, you know, I know what it was like when I was that kid.
Yeah.
And if the main masses of people knew that this is happening right here in the U.S., I think it would be a lot more upheaval, and I think there'd be a lot more things that that people would be doing to put some kind of regulation on this song, put some kind of
Absolutely.
Something rather.
Yeah, and honestly, to that point too, is that because there could be somebody out there that is suffering as a result of being there, and even not even being there now. But there's also a parent that has either placed their child there or is considering, and that's one of the reasons why we wanted to do these stories, so that people understood that it was very real and that something needed to be done in terms of regulations and somebody governing over this, because it's shocking that it continues on. It is no wonder to me why you would have feelings of authority figures and crowds, and I'm sure in some respects sometimes doubting who you are as an individual through this process.
Sure.
But I want to tell you that, and I tell everybody that comes on this show and has the courage to speak out, because it's never an easy thing to do. I don't care how many times you do it. That if you ever run into a moment in which you think that you're questioning your self-worth, I hope that you look to this moment here and realize how special you actually are to be able to be here today and to speak and to do that. And I think that you're an amazing young man that, you overcoming, worthiness is our birthright. I say this all the time, but you overcoming that and everything that you have gone through escalates the level of worthiness for you as an individual to a level that people just will never understand. And I hope that you never doubt, because I just, knowing your story, seeing you sitting here talking to me today, it's truly an honor. And I know that somewhere out there, somebody is watching this and you are making a difference. And I hope that you know that.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's super special. You've been part of other movements and what did that do for you?
In a lot of ways, I think it was just as helpful for myself as it was for those that I was helping.
Yeah.
It was definitely cathartic in a sense. Helping others is definitely something that's really important to me.
Oh, yes.
I've been saying for a while that as important as this is to help, children that are currently locked behind these walls and prevent future children from going behind those walls, I also really want to be there for those that have already been behind those walls and, try to establish something for survivors and, whether it's a person they can call, an ear to let them vent, whatever it is. I've given away, my personal phone number and email to plenty of people. There have been countless nights where I've been up till, the crack of dawn listening to, whatever was going on.
Absolutely.
Various woes, talking down suicides, things like that. And that's something I'm really happy to be able to be there for people. And in that sense, I think it's kind of cathartic for me as well.
Sure. Speaking of that, as we near the end, I want to give the opportunity, if you're comfortable, if somebody wanted to email you, what would be the best email for them to reach out to you?
Sir Theo Charles at gmail.com.
Okay, and that's Sir S-I-R, correct?
S-I-R, yeah. It's a long-standing joke from an incident at Burning Man.
Doesn't matter to me. The fact that you're willing to give that out and to be there for somebody, well, it just adds to all the pluses that I have in terms of when I look at you and seeing you as an individual. So, please keep me posted on how things are going for you. And I really look forward to staying connected and watching you grow and prosper, because, once we get past this whole pandemic thing, I see great things for you, because you have a great heart and a great mind and just a lot of passion and empathy, and I think it's awesome. So Thank you so much for coming on here. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for creating a platform for us.
100%. So that is our show. It is the first one of 2021, and I'm super excited to continue on with this series. And you'll have the opportunity to meet more great people like Theo. So don't forget to tune in. Thank you so much.
And this.